At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Super NES podcast, episode number 216. I am Greg. He is Joe.
Hello.
And we are now starting another series of games, which is similar in some ways to the games, like the games that we just covered before. A bunch of platformers and shooters, but these are not movie-related games. So we're actually covering in this episode an interesting game to talk about, at least for at least because of how decisive that this game is, and maybe Joe and I will disagree on our opinions about this game as we get into it anyway. But it's definitely if nothing else, this is an interesting game to talk about, which is why I want to cover this in the podcast. We're going to cover the Super NES port. I use the word port loosely here, like the classic arcade game Space Ace. So.
Interpretation, I think, would be the best way to explain it, rather than a port.
I guess you could also use the word like reimagining, but
yeah, there you go.
Let's see, the Wikipedia article actually, the Wikipedia article on the game actually calls it a version of the game. So, which that works too. But
yeah,
but anyway, yeah. So Space Ace. Well, probably familiar to most people listening to the podcast, but just in case you don't know about it very much, because to be fair, this is an old game. We'll talk about the game a little bit, because that knowledge will also help you understand how the Super NES version of the game compares to the original arcade version of the game. So, Space Ace was the second of the so-called Don Bluth trilogy of games. It was a Laserdisc game, which released for arcades back in December of 1983. Shortly after the first game, Dragon's Lair had come out. Laserdisc games were a brief fad in the early 80s. At the same time, the vector graphic games were also the rage. There's a lot more information you can find online, podcast, articles, whatever, talking about the rise and fall of the Laserdisc games. But in a nutshell, they were basically arcade cabs that ran everything off like a Laserdisc. Using a Laserdisc player. For those of you really young out there, Laserdiscs were in competition for a while with other media formats in the 80s to try to offer an improved quality of home release for movies and whatnot that you could get on they get like VHS or or Beta at the time. I remember as a kid, a friend of mine had a Laserdisc player, and he had the Star Wars trilogy on that, which is fun to watch on Laserdisc because the quality was definitely better. The quality was definitely better for the movies than anything I had to VHS at the time. That's for sure.
Yeah. I was actually going to jump in and interject that it's basically the early precursor to DVDs.
Yes.
A lot of Laserdiscs were the first ones to really not only improve the quality of the video that you'd be watching, but included audio commentaries and some special features. I remember the first Laserdisc movie that I ever actually had any experience with was, I believe it was Mallrats or Clerks, that my friend had. And,
interesting movies to be on Laserdisc.
yeah, and it had Kevin Smith's commentary, and he kind of jokingly, infamously made a joke about how Laserdisc was the superior format in that DVD was not going to last. So that is definitely a footnote in history. But yeah, I wanted to interject that real quick.
That's fine.
Yeah. Like Laserdisc was crazy, and it's amazing that you can literally see the evolution of like media in general. Like and obviously this is a little bit off topic, but like, you had reel to reel and 8mm and things of that nature. And then you had your VHS and beta, and then you have Laserdisc, and then they had, what was it? Like, it was cassette disc or something like that. It was
something like that. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And like those were the competing, and then it just turned into DVD and eventually Blu-ray. And here we are with like 4K Blu-rays and digital now. Like it's crazy to think like how much the media has changed over the course of just 20 years, never mind 30 to 40 years.
Yeah. It also should be pointed out to point out that these Laserdiscs were huge. They were the size like records. So like but I actually I remember being like a used bookstore a couple years ago, and they actually had Laserdiscs out like for sale. And I remember they basically had a sign in front of them saying, basically, these are not records. These are not records. They're records. These are pre-DVD optical video discs.
Yeah.
If you're buying one with the hardware, please don't, because you won't be able to play it.
That's great.
But they were around for a long time. Actually, actually got launched in the U.S. in the U.S. in 1978, and they were still and like the last movie in North America came out in 2000. Believe it or not.
Oh wow.
So the format's here for like a long time. As a matter of fact, Laserdisc players were made. Laserdisc players made in 2009. Pioneer would still service them until 2020. So despite it being a niche format, they did pretty well. But there were however some serious drawbacks to Laserdiscs. One is they were expensive. Comparatively speaking, both the players and also the discs themselves. They scratched very easily, easier than CDs did. So you really had to be you really had to be ginger with them. Also, depending upon how. Also, my experience has been that, and most people experience it also seems like had similar problems. And the problem like buying them used is like disc rot and other malfunctions keeping you from playing the disc in the first place is also common. The lifespan of the disc was not as long as like say DVDs or VHS tapes, because so you may buy a disc nowadays that looks fine, but whether or not it would play or not, it's a whole different story. So we have to be careful about that. So and the players themselves were clunky, unreliable, and prone to break down, which also was a big problem with the Laserdisc players in the arcades because the companies that made these games, like Space Age, they would simply buy the cheapest stock Laserdisc players that were available by the companies, which weren't very good to begin with. So, it's a big problem with like these Laserdisc-based video games, and one of the big reasons the format eventually, which the fad that crashed and burned was burned, that the arcade owners would spend more time with the machine down than the machine actually working order because there's like players. So. So that's pretty much that, and the high development costs. Now their cost killed it, as well as also the very limited replayability of these games, because as great as Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, and Dragon's Lair 2 were to watch, the cartoon work on them was just amazing, but the actual playability was not that deep. Yeah, I mean, people pumping quarters for a while to figure out what moves you had to combine to do to beat the games. Because all three games you have to do a certain number of joystick pushes and buttons at the right time to advance in the game. Like otherwise you die. Once you figure that out, the game lost all like replay value. So between the game having very limited shelf life as it was, and also the players being prone to break down. The whole Laserdisc thing was pretty much a short-lived fad. So, But yeah, Space Ace did try to address some of the problems that Dragon's Lair had, however, as far as that went. The basic plot of this game, the plot of this game is kind of similar to Dragon's Lair, just like set like in the future instead. Where you're controlling like a hero who's named Dexter, and you're trying to rescue your girlfriend and stop Commander Borf, who wants to use like Inferno Ray to turn like Earthlings to infants. So. Yeah. One of the gimmicks for Space Age, however, like a way to try to make the game easier for players, for Dragon Lair, was every now and then you get the ability to energize, which allows you to turn into Ace, the super studly superhero version of Dexter, and you can do certain things in the game are easier to do as Ace. It is possible to play all the way through Space Age without energizing, but definitely doing it carefully does help with the rougher areas of the game. Makes the game like overall easier. So also some of the controls were also modified a little bit to make it a little bit easier. Space Ace is not quite as demanding on you as having to having that window to do the precise moves is not quite as bad as Space Age like in Dragon's Lair. So. Overall, the game's a little bit easier for that. There's also multiple paths like a lot of the scenes, but it also helps out, and skill levels can be selected this time as well too. But I mean, if you play the game, obviously you really can take advantage of that if you keep your home version of the game. If you're playing this in arcade, you're at the mercy of whatever the arcade has it set at. But easy, medium, and hard were selectable as far as that goes. So the combination of all those things was done by the team, like an effort to address some of the concerns and complaints people had about Dragon's Lair, and they definitely helped. I still think Space Ace is not a great game, but it is important for the history and for what it brought to the table, and I do think overall Space Ace is an easier game to play, not quite as frustrating as Dragon's Lair is.
Yeah.
What's your experience at history like this game, Joe?
So I remember Dragon's Lair in the arcade. I can vividly remember seeing Dragon's Lair in the arcade. Space Ace and even Dragon's Lair 2, I never once saw these in the arcade at all. My first experience with Space Ace was through emulation and early rough emulation in the early 2000s. That just was really clunky, super slow. Even with at the time, my Voodoo FX2, which was so impressive. I thought that it would run no issue, but there was clearly some issues. Also, I was just getting into emulation, and really emulation in general was really in its infancy in that time.
Sure.
Thankfully, at that time, also, I'm assuming the Don Bluth company, if not some subsidiary of that, recognized that with the DVD format, these games could be revitalized and possibly be profitable. So they did release a DVD set of Dragon's Lair, Dragon's Lair 2, and Space Ace. These versions are the versions that would later be ported to PS3, PS4, PS5, whatever they got now. But this is where it started. You had to use your DVD remote, which was fitting because that's kind of how it was in the arcade. You just had your directionals and your one button for the action.
Right.
And you would, I remember it being slightly easier than the arcade, but that's not saying much. I think it did, that increased time window that was there for Space Ace. I think they, incorporated into all three games. So it did make Dragon's Lair a little easier. But yeah, this was really my first experience with Space Ace was being at home with my DVD player, which I guess is prime because one, get to see the entire game at your own leisure. But also, like, they had the option you could watch just the cartoon and it would just play through. Or, if you really needed the help, they did have a, option where, like, the screen would light up when you needed to go in a certain direction.
Yep.
So that made it a lot easier. So if you wanted to actually play through the game, you could do that. And again, the ports for the different systems that, this trilogy eventually came out on, all incorporated those quality of life features, and made these games a lot easier to play down the line. Today, playing these games is a breeze. Until you go to Fun Spot in North New Hampshire. I believe Fun Spot is the only place, other than probably Galloping Galaxies, that has a working Dragon's Lair cabinet. I mean, obviously, they've had reproductions that have come with the iArcade and whatever else, but I'm talking like real hardware with the actual Laserdisc. I believe those two are the only two places that have at least advertised working ones, and I have played the original there at Fun Spot, and it's a totally different experience. So
those machines, like we were talking about, those machines are very hard to keep running. So because, but they actually. They probably use a Sony LDP player to play the disc because of the fact that because the original Pioneer ones are so unreliable. So
yeah, and I mean, if you couldn't tell through my explanation of everything, like, I absolutely love Space Ace. I think they did such a good job with it. It was a fitting sequel yet kind of spin-off for Dragon's Lair, and really just kind of built up the hype for what would be Dragon's Lair 2 when that was released.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good segue. As you were talking about, Space Ace, we did get numerous ports over the years. Way back when in the 80s, the game was released for computers as well, which tried to emulate the animated hand-drawn footage you use in the game. Like varying degrees of success. All these ports obviously were disc based because of how old, because of the time period, the 80s and whatnot. So you could buy the game for Amiga, Apple II, Atari ST, DOS, and Macintosh. Later on, they also released a CD-ROM version of the game. There was a sequel created for the game in the late '80s. Space Age 2: Borf's Revenge, which was only available on computers and is not ported to modern systems. Looks like so.
Okay, that makes sense because I'm like, I didn't even know there was a sequel, but that makes sense if it was for the the Amstrad and the Amiga and stuff like that.
Right. So the game also was released for the Philips CDI, the Sega CD. There also was the Dragon Lair's deluxe patch. A pack that Joe was just talking about. Mm-hmm. Daphne's also an option. If you have the actual original Laserdisc, you can just there's an emulator that they created called Daphne, which you can download to play Dragon's Lair 1 and 2 and Space Ace. If you had the original disc. So the game is also available on iOS. I don't know if it still is on there, but it was on there eventually at one point. The game is also available on Wii, PS3, Android, Steam. It's on Steam still currently. Modern consoles, PS4, PS5, Xbox. That's down there as well too. So. And also, Arcade One Up also sells a cab that has all 3 games on as well too. So.
That I didn't know. Nice.
Yeah. It's recreation Yeah, like usual recreation like the arcade cabinet with the controls and whatnot. Like it has Dragon's Lair 1 and 2 and Space Age on it. So, all three of these games are currently available on modern systems, which is nice. So, they can go out there, they can play it. Pretty much Switch. The Switch is the only console, the only modern console which doesn't even have the game. But anything else, Steam, PS4, PS5, Xbox, whatever, you can play it with. So, as well as the arcade one-up cab, flavor we're going to go the actual authentic quote unquote experience. So, the game was not as popular in the arcades as Dragon's Lair was, but it's still popular enough. So.
I just want to make a quick correction.
Sure.
Dragon's Lair Trilogy is available on the Switch.
Okay, it is. Yeah, my sources don't the Switch version for some reason. So,
yeah, I was like, I have that. I was like, I'm almost 100% sure it's there.
yeah, that makes sense. But it probably but okay, yeah. Sorry about that. Thanks. My sources, like I said, just to mention that. So. Anyway, so they want to try to get the game, both Dragon's Lair and Space Age, on some cartridge-based systems as well too. But the NES, Super NES, Genesis, whatever. But of course, obviously, there was no way to be able to port a game as sophisticated and fancy as these games, like they're like top quality level cartoon graphics on a cart-based system. I mean, rotographics they could do, games like Prince of Persia, Out of This World, whatever. That was fine, but trying to actually, there was no way that there's no way that they're going to be able to port the actual cartoon graphics on a cart based system. So instead they made inspired by or versions of those games for the systems. So Dragon's Lair was available on both the NES and Super NES. I never played the Super NES version of the game. We'll probably have to cover it eventually at some point, but the NES version of the game was not very good. There were numerous problems with that game. So, the hit detection of that game was atrocious to begin with. So,
we did cover that game.
The Super NES version?
Yeah.
Apparently, we did it. Well, we did. Apparently, it was so bad I blocked it out of memory. So.
I mean, you should have, because it was that kind of experience. I'm actually going back right now to find out which episode it actually was.
Because I have strong memories, because I have strong memories. I have strong memories playing the NES version of the game. But if you did cover the Super NES version of it, I don't remember it, which is saying a lot for how bad it must have been. So. They wanted to do the same thing with Space Ace, and they actually did develop like an NES version of Space Ace as well too, which apparently was finished but never released. The ROMs never turned up. There's only 2 screenshots of the game. The game that's available online. Based on the screenshots, it looks to be the game looks to be very similar to Dragon's Lair. NES how that plays. So probably no great loss for the game community that version of the game ever came out.
So Dragon's Lair we covered back at episode 141, which was just after the interview with Dan Kitchen that you did, which I believe 141 was my first episode.
Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe that's why I don't remember it, but yeah.
Because it was 3 years ago.
I actually don't remember playing it. It must have been a very bad game.
Yeah. It was definitely. I remember it was a hell of a way to start my introduction onto the show, and we both panned it pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, Space Age for the Super NES, however, is a very different beast. They were trying to. Let me see how I can put this.
They were trying to emulate the arcade game, the mechanics of the arcade game, into a platformer. With
I was going to say actually,
I was going to say very mixed results, but really it's just all bad. Spoiler.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I actually feel a little bit differently from you about that. Which I'm not
Okay.
surprised by, but yeah. So yeah. But yes, thank you. The developers were trying to retain the look and feel, and the gameplay of the arcade games best they could, whilst reimagining the game for Super NES, take it to Super NES to take advantage of the hardware that was running on that kind of stuff. So whether or not you think they did a good job of that or not is up to you. But at least give the developers credit for trying, because they recognize what a challenge that would have been, and so they're trying to do that to like the best they could. So. The Super NES version of the game was developed by a very small company called Oxford Digital Enterprises, which I could find very little about online. I only found one of the game of theirs that they made, a computer game called Deathbringer for 1991. So this company did not appear to be very active, and/or did very much. They probably were tapped to do the game because of the fact that they offered to do it for cheap. So. Who published the game depending upon where in the world the game was released at, because the game didn't get a worldwide release. In North America, the game was published by Absolute. In Japan it was published by Imager, and in Europe it was published by a company called Enterprise Interactive. So 1994 was the year the game came out, in all three versions. So having set everything up, so having just talked about how the developers tried to retain the look and feel of the arcade game, Joe, what were your impressions and or experiences playing this game?
So what this game set out to do, it did. I think this game very much feels like a arcade interpretation for the Super Nintendo. It's slow. It's methodical. You need to remember a lot of stuff. Memorization is key in this. But one of the things I found very, upsetting, I guess, would be the best word to use, because I had a lot of expectations going into this, and they were quickly shattered. So the memorization thing is huge. There are points in this game, like I said, it works like the arcade game. So you do have to move in certain directions, much like you would in the actual cartoon version that you would play in the arcade. And then you have certain areas where you have to jump, and the jump very much feels, and you might argue this, but it feels like that Prince of Persia type of animation, where it's very slow and methodical, and you have to really think about all your moves, but everything is moving to the point where you don't have time to think about that. Like I said, I commend them for doing what they did here, because the idea, I think, is there in the game. I just think the way it was executed wasn't so good. I personally spent probably way too long on the first level. My exact notes say you will get very familiar with Mountainside, and it seems like that's how the game is set up. The animations are really nice, crisp, clear. I thought the sprites were amazing. Some of the animations, not only just from the beginning, with the rotating story that you can't realistically read as it's coming at you, or the still shots that you see, or the death animations, all those are very impressive, and definitely look great on the Super Nintendo. But man, Commander Borf, right off the bat, he's shooting lasers at you, and it took me probably 20 to 30 deaths to finally just realize that there is one particular spot in the beginning where if you just stand, you don't do anything else, which is totally contrary to any other game that you've probably ever played that's a platformer. There is a point where you can just stand, and the lasers will go around you, and then there's a specific point where you need to move to avoid the other lasers, and you won't understand any of that until you actually play the game and understand the memorization that has to come with it. And it really sounds like I'm really like poo-pooing on this game, but the reality is like this is the raw reality of this game. Like, it's very much trying to be the arcade game in that experience of precise movement and action, but in a platformer, which is not how platformers are played. So there's a lot of like getting used to it and everything else. I did, however, like I said, love the animations. I think the animations are great and whatnot. When I finally did get to a point where I could energize, this brings a whole new challenge, because you have a pretty good sized sprite to begin with. And then when you energize, you become an adult. And as an adult, you're doing the same things you were doing as your kid, except for your sprite's a little bit bigger, so that means you're easier to hit. And they give you this really slow reticle so that you can shoot things. Because kids can't have guns. That's a bet. You gotta be an adult to have a gun. And it just moves really slow. And like, I don't know, like, this game wore on me. It really did. I tried very hard to enjoy it. And, yeah, it's just a real negative experience all around. I finally was able to get somewhere because I started just literally every step I would take that was new, I would just hit save state. Save state. Save state. Like, that was the only way I could do it because I just kept dying so many times. So, like, I tried to play it like this was, I'm playing it on the Super Nintendo, I'm going to take it as it is, like, and we'll see where it goes. And I legit died over 30 times. And what I was saying about how, like, this game is designed knowing that you're not going to get very far, you know, there's not too much to touch on, so I will touch on it here. Like, the music is a 30-second loop. And yeah, it does change as you progress through the different levels or whatever else. But for the first level, that is a 30-second loop that you are not even supposed to realize is a 30-second loop because you'll be too busy dying. That being said, you do get some variety. Like I said, you got, you know, your small ace and your big ace after you energize. But there's also 2 flying levels, which were kind of a nice change, but not really because it's just more of the same. And even more difficult so because you're in a UFO, where it's just kind of like you're, you know, moving left and right and shooting things and, you know, avoiding obstacles. That's fine. The second one, you're in a different type of spaceship and it's like a maze. And, that one in particular, I really got frustrated with. But like, I think, and the reason I had to use save states is because when you die in this game, you start back at the beginning of the level. So that's why I said in the beginning, you're going to get to be very familiar with the mountainside and you're going to learn the memorization of where you need to stand or where you need to move because you're going to be doing it so many times. It's not even funny. Jumping. So the first level, you kind of get a taste of it. You can jump and it has that slow methodical jump, kind of like Prince of Persia. You can hold the B button to jump a little longer. That comes into play later on in the game. There is a point where there's like these dissolving platforms, that you have to jump across, and holding that B button and having it held for the right amount to be able to do the right jump to make it to the other platforms, ends up becoming very tedious. That is another spot where you are going to die numerous times until you get it correct. Again, save states. You're going to hear that a lot because I cannot recommend, recommend playing this on real hardware. I can't recommend you buying this game. Emulate, because you're going to need those save states. And it's kind of fitting that almost 3 years 3 years and a month, if we want to get technical, was when we covered Dragon's Lair, because Dragon's Lair was a bad game, but compared to this, Dragon's Lair is the better game. And that's really saying a lot, because I know I was harsh, and I know you were as well, Greg, when we covered Dragon's Lair, even though you don't remember, which is fair. That's 3 years ago. But yeah, it's like, it's just like they tried something, and I commend them for trying it. I think if they had gone the same route they did with Dragon's Lair, where they just interpreted it as a platformer and went in that direction instead of, yeah, let's do a platformer, but you still have to have precise movement and jumps like the arcade game, I think this could have been a fantastic game, because there is definitely a good game here. There's a fantastic game. Like I said, the animations are great. There is so much potential here. And it might be the inexperience of the people who ported it. That's a very good possibility as well. But I hate to say that, because they did capture, as I stated, the essence of what the arcade game is. It's just, I don't know, it just didn't translate here in gameplay. And I think what really killed this too, and I even made this in my notes, 2 years ago, we played Chrono Trigger, and reviewed that game. So, I don't know, man. It seems like this was just a bad time to be playing Space Ace. We played so many better games in the past years at this time.
Well, there's probably going to be some like terrible games coming up soon, like the podcast as well too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all that. You saved me from having to save. You saved me from having to say a lot of stuff. I'll just touch upon. So I'll just expand upon or highlight a couple things. A couple things that you said. Let's do the easy stuff first. Music. I agree with you about the music. I do like how they had the original arcade game music, like the main menu. That was a nice touch. But the actual music during the gameplay, however, is pretty bad. I agree with you. The sound effects, however, I thought were very good. There's a lot of sampled voices of voices and sound effects like an arcade game here. So the actual sound work in this game, I thought was very good. I agree with you. The graphics in the game are great. At least during the platformers. The side-scrolling and the top-down sections were like very great graphics. Maybe. The line art was a bit wonky. I think I think the lack of shading makes the sprites kind of appear like too sharp and pixelated, and the colors and the overall color work was a bit too bright, I thought. But the game runs smoothly. I didn't have any slowdown playing this game, so I don't know about you, but I had like no slowdown. So the fact they actually got the essence, most of the graphics from the arcade game in this game and having it play smoothly is testament to the fact that at least the programmers, at least they had some experience getting this ported over, because the programming work on this game could not have been easy.
Yeah.
So get my credit for that. The graphics, however, like the ship sections, however, I really did. I really didn't care for all that much. I mean, yes, your ship's nice, but in the backgrounds, but the backgrounds just get like annoying after a while.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the fact, however, because the arcade game didn't have those ship sections. I do appreciate like how they broke it up a little bit by having the different gameplay sections, like as well too. There's 22 stages altogether in this game, by the way. So, and there's no difficult level to pick from either. Like there's like one difficult level and that's it. But the controls, I agree with you. The controls, I definitely agree with you. For the most part, they're slow, they're sluggish, they're floaty. You can get used to it. Especially and I think that Ace is easier to control than Dexter is.
Yeah.
But the angle jumping controls can be. I had the hard. I definitely had the hardest part, like of those. I think like the hardest thing in this game to control, we have like angle jumps because those are not, like very good. So, however, the game is full of like secrets to find. However, there's a whole bunch of secret areas, secret items to find in the game. If you do certain things, the right spot, that kind of stuff. So that that's helped the replayability of the game some. Also, I'm not sure if you realize this, Joe, but if you want to get the best ending of the game, the very best ending of the game is so difficult to get because when you finish a stage, the game grades you. The game gives you the game assesses you based upon the number of shots taken, number of enemies destroyed, their ability, their style, like an overall tally. So if I care about getting to the game, you really don't care about that. You really don't need to care about that. However, if you want to get the best ending of the game, you have to clear all 22 stages of the game. Single run with Ace rating on every single stage.
Yeah.
So
good luck with that.
Well, there are videos on YouTube. Like the guy did it.
Of course.
But it's not easy. So as a matter of fact, to quote one of those reviewers, about that because it's actually a great line. It's a tall order. Quote tall order, but it's quite doable. With a lot of patience, pen and paper hand, and most likely a lot of liquor hanging out nearby. So making maps in this game is definitely encouraged.
Yeah.
Especially those like ship areas. And again, like the arcade game, you have to memorize or write down what combos the combination do at what time to make it through the game. Because Joe said that first stage of the game is very, very difficult, and you're already playing through it a lot. So. And there's no continue feature either. Once your lives are out, that's it, game over. So
yeah.
The difficulty of this level is very, very high, for sure. So, having said all that, I don't hate the game. I don't like, I don't like it, but let me see how I can best phrase this. The game definitely appeals to a certain kind of gamer. Like we said before, they tried their hardest to retain the look and feel and the flow of the arcade game. So, if you're the kind of gamer who enjoys a challenge, who enjoys a very methodical platformer as opposed to like a very fast-paced shoot kind of a style game, and if you're willing, if you're willing to invest time and effort into it, you can have a fun. You can have a fun time with the game. I definitely can see somebody having a fun time with the game if you have that mindset to enjoy a game like this. Like me, I don't have the patience for this. But I think the developers, as we said, the developers succeeded in their job of trying to, trying to make a game that the game that captures the feel like the arcade game. Whether or not it's a good thing or bad thing depends upon your patient and tolerance for games like this and whatnot. So I didn't like this game a lot, but at the same time. But at the same time, I can't hate it because I said I realize I'm just not the kind of gamer whose games is for. But this is for somebody who's a big fan like the original arcade game, who is willing to put in the time, the money, the effort to do well in this. And if you bought the game or was given the game as a gift back then, you probably would. You probably would feel obligated to do that, but because the actual playthroughs of this game online are pretty short, like 45 minutes, give or take. So once you know what you're doing, the actual time through this game is not it's not long. But just like I said, it depends upon programming challenge, achievement challenge. The developers exceed it. Like I said, whether or not the game's quote unquote fun for you depends upon depends on depends on what you're looking for. I think so. I just can't bring myself to hate I can't bring myself to hate this game because I think this game, for what it's trying to achieve for that very niche style player, does a very good job at it. But it's not for the common gamer out there for sure. For sure, it's not for like you or I, definitely. So.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I'm. It sounds like I'm poo-pooing the game, and I am to a point. But like you said, it's an incredible feat that they were able to emulate that gameplay of the arcade here in Super NES 16-bit form. So you have to commend them for that. And I'm with you. I don't absolutely hate this game, but it's not something I'm going to go back and play anytime soon.
Yeah, but so I think also right. I actually was compared. So I don't know if you played this game before, Joe, but I actually was minded to play this game. I actually think this game has a lot in common with another notorious, very hard NES game. I'm not sure if you ever played it. So it reminded me a lot like Legacy of the Wizard.
No, I haven't played that.
Yeah, it's very similar in many ways. In many ways, both games are very slow, difficult games. We have to take your time, make maps, spend hours upon hours and hours. They not really make any progress, but for those people who. But Legacy of the Wizard to this day, they have you're always a very passionate cult following of the game because of all those factors. So Space Age really reminds me of you like that game in many ways. So. But and also speaking about a challenge, in my research for this game, the Japanese had a much higher opinion of this game than Americans did, apparently, because they actually appreciated the consistency, the challenge level, the overall logic of the game. So yeah. Famitsu, the big bag of the game magazine over there, actually rated the game pretty well. They gave it 25 out of 40. So. I think this game definitely has a bigger following in Japan than just anywhere else in the world, it seems like.
Yeah, I would assume this is very much like some of those Amiga games and Amstrad games that they would, the computer-based games that they would have. Some of those were very much like this, where they were slow and methodical. Some of them were difficult. So I can see how Europeans would actually be at home with a port like this in all reality. And that's not a knock on them. That's just, the different mindset. They were used to more computer-based gaming versus, us with our controllers and whatnot.
Right. So speaking about reviews, the reviews of this game were mixed. We're mixed when it was released, and reviews of the game are still mixed today. Contemporary critics tend to be a little bit harsher on this game, calling it one of the worst games in the system. But there are some people, like I said, there are some people that really enjoy the game still. So, yeah. Most magazines back in the day just basically said they can basically said the same thing about the game that we just said. The graphics are great. The variety of gameplay is great. The gameplay overall being slow, methodical, repetitive, frustrating parts. The controls, the jumps especially, were something that they commented on a lot. So which again is not that great. So modern, like I said, modern reviewers tend to be a bit harsher. But there are some people out there still really enjoy this game. So, but like I said before, depends upon the kind of gamer you are, I think. So, But so there is there are so there's so many just like I mentioned, there's so many hidden areas, secret items to find in this game, whatever. I'm not gonna touch all of them here. There is however one code in this game. There's one code in the game. There's a stage select code that you can do on the title screen. So you like at least that way be able to advance the game. And if you use that code, you'll be able to hold down the R button and walk over pits as well too as an added bonus. Oh. So there's one cheat code to make your game a little bit easier at least, and like a parts. So this game seems like it's sold. This game seems like it's sold reasonably well. I mean it's not super common, but it's not the most uncommon game either. There are copies to be had online of this game like pretty easily. The time to research, eBay had 47 copies of this game listed recently, with 12 copies of the game not recently sold. But because of how hard the game is, because of generally overall negative reception, this is actually one of the cheaper Super NES games to pick up for your collection. So these prices include shipping. Cart prices of the game sold recently ranging from $9.50 to $30. So and CIB copies, there were two copies of the game sold recently. One for $53 and one for $90, depending upon the overall quality of the box and the contents and whatever. So not a very expensive game to get for your collection. Even a steel copy of this game sold recently for $138. Yeah. So there also was a graded copy of the game. The graded copy of the game that sold recently for $415, but graded copies are nuts anyway. So there's not very the grade's not really like a fair representation like what the game's actually worth. I don't think. Yeah. We'll just know that it's an outlier. But overall, like you're collecting this, this is relatively cheap game to pick up. So
yeah, and as a collector, I mean, I said don't play this on real hardware because you're gonna need those save states. But the game is cheap enough. Like this is one of those I'd be like, yeah, pick up a cart if you can, but still emulate it.
Yeah. Yeah, the last question I was thinking about though, the one I want to ask you your opinion about is this game is very, very different to an arcade game. So the question I was just wondering is is it more so having said all that, is it worthwhile to play this version of the game now when you can get the arcade version of the game running so perfectly on either the arcade one-up cab or a modern computer system or console, because it's the games are different enough that maybe you can see the appeal in playing the Super NES version of the game nowadays. And I'm also the arcade version of the game is so commonly available, runs so well, and it's such a better experience overall. Why bother? I really don't know if I have I really don't know if I have a full answer to that.
So I think you asked me the same question when we recorded Dragon's Lair.
I probably did.
And I am honestly going to answer it the very same way. Play the arcade versions or the ports that we have now for other systems that play the arcade version and emulate it perfectly. These Super Nintendo ports or the NES port or the Game Boy port, as far as, Dragon's Lair is concerned, in my opinion, just play the arcade version. The ports are interesting for their time frame. If we were still in a world where, for some reason, technology has not advanced and we can't emulate arcade games or whatever reason, and the Super Nintendo and Game Boy ports are all we had, then absolutely, I could easily recommend one of the ports. But since we live in a crazy world where pretty much, if you have the will, there is a way to get these things to run and work perfectly. Even if you do not have the ports, available to you, I absolutely say play the original games, that were originally presented in the arcade. And if if, and this is a very small if, you, for some reason, feel you need some more Space Ace and you just did not get enough from that arcade experience, then sure, check this out. But don't say we didn't warn you. That's where I'm going to leave that one. But in my opinion, with the arcade originals being able to be played as they were technically intended, with a controller rather than an arcade base, I don't see a reason for the ports. But there's people out there that still enjoy playing, say, Turtles in Time for the Super Nintendo. Even though you could play the arcade game. And, in my opinion, the arcade game's the better experience. But there are others who love Turtles in Time for the Super Nintendo. And I'm not going to take that away from them. Because, maybe you've beaten the arcade game God knows how many times. And you want that change of pace, that you get from the Super Nintendo version. The extra levels, the different mechanics and whatnot.
Yes, that's definitely me, because I think that Turtles in Time is better on Super NES.
Yeah.
But this is like an arcade, so, but yeah.
You're wrong, but I let you have your opinion.
But anyway, okay, yep, that's a good assessment, and like I said before, so I agree with all that mostly. Again, I'll just add on the point that, if you're the kind of gamer who enjoys a game like this, aka Legacy of the Wizard, and you're willing to put in the challenge, the time, there could be some fun in this game still. So, but I'm glad I'm also glad they carried over the death animations in this game, because the death animations are very good. So
yeah,
because you will see yourself die a lot. So at least they were carried over very well. So. Anyway, so that's Space Ace. Interesting game, for sure, at least. So, let's see. On the podcast next, we're going to be covering another platformer, but a very different style platformer. I think this is your pick, Joe. We're going to be looking at the Lord of the Rings on the Super NES, loosely based upon the books. Because obviously the movies had not come out yet.
Correct.
By that point. So, I know nothing about this, so I'll be going to a blind. So I'd be curious to see how it is.
Believe it or not, I will also be going in blind. This is one of those that I've always seen it in ROM packs for the Super Nintendo, and it's just one of those you see it, I go, I wonder how that game actually is. But then I never build up the gall to be able to actually load the game up and check it out, because I just, when I think of Lord of the Rings, I think RPG automatically. RPG comes to mind, and I have to be in the right mindset to be able to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to boot up an RPG and start playing it. I've never been in that mindset for Lord of the Rings, and I figured by putting it here on the podcast, I don't have a choice. I have to play it now. So, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I've not played a lot of Lord of the Rings games. Period. There was an unreleased 2600 game, Lord of the Rings, based on the books. Also, never came out, but was complete.
Huh.
I did play Shadows of Mordor a little bit. So that was a fun game, but it's very, very different.
Oh yeah.
Different. You really can't.
Oh, yeah.
You really can't. It's set set in that world. But it doesn't really have too much to do with the books, the movie. So
right. It builds off the lore that the movies created.
Yes, yeah. So, I agree with this. I agree with this. Should be interesting. So, maybe it'd be a good game, maybe a bad game. We don't know. So, tune in next time to find out. Yep. So, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to leave them on our Facebook page. You can also email me directly at the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com. We will be coming at you again in 2 weeks, as always. Joe, where can they reach you at?
You can reach me at JOESUX30 on Twitter. I also do the Radical Retro Roundup podcast, which, you can Google me or the podcast, and it it pops up. So I don't have to go through the whole spiel of where you can find it. But there is a public Facebook page for the podcast. And we do once a month. So, we were talking a little bit off mic, but the next 2 months are slated to be Shadowrun for the SNES and then for the Genesis. So, it's going to be fun now playing, because we'll be recording next week. So I've gotten through as much of the Super Nintendo version I'm going to get through, but now I got to play Lord of the Rings as well as Shadowrun for the Genesis coinciding. So this should be a fun next 2 weeks for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yes, looking forward to it for sure. But anyway, appreciate everybody listening to the podcast as always. Thank you very much. Stay safe, be well, and catch you again next time.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep of power.